The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions, and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
User joined your channel.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. This is Two Beards Talking with Daniel Sanders
and Matt Lassiter.
And as always, we want to give a big shout out to the troops. You guys are doing a good job. Keep up the good work. Come home safe. Everybody's rooting for you at home. As we start off with every week, we're going to hit our crybaby of the week. We have one for you, and this one was a doozy. I saw the video on this, and I really could not believe it when I saw it.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was interesting for sure. So, a woman is on a crowded public bus, and she is losing her mind because nobody around her is offering to give up their seat for her. Now, okay, so you were raised as a gentleman. I was raised as a gentleman. But this was a pretty fucking crowded bus. There was no room for anybody to move on this thing.
I mean, yeah, someone could have offered, but the way she went about it, oh no. We would have just both been there till we died.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's no way.
She's talking about, and she's not even talking, she's yelling, going crazy. That nobody is acting like a gentleman. Well, you're not acting like a fucking lady. You get what you give.
That's true.
So,
yeah.
So,
not much to say about that one.
There's really not. So, Angry Bus Lady, this one is for you.
I like that cry a little bit better than
it is a little bit better. So, now we've had some pretty big updates from some previous stories. The biggest one is the Jussie Smollett situation.
Oh, this is great! I love it.
Yeah, so
every second of it.
You know, I've been saying from day one that this did not seem like a legit thing. This had to have been bogus.
Well, I tried to stay, on the fence. I tried to wait till all the facts came out. And I kind of hoped that it wasn't a hoax because of the fact that when you have a hoax like this, it takes away from all the people that actually do experience hate crimes.
Right.
And it makes them harder to believe. So for the sake of all the people out there that do experience this, I was hoping that he didn't make this up.
Right. Yeah, all he's done is he's made it harder for people to be believed now.
I mean, there's literally a website out there called fakehatecrime.org.
Yeah.
And you can go and look up all the top fake hate crimes, and there's 349 of them.
Yeah. We actually reached out to Jussie Smollett for a comment in response to the allegations that this is now becoming a hoax, and this is what we got back from him.
I'm kicking my ass! Do you mind?
I mean, that sounds about right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, he hired 2 Nigerians to do it, but same thing.
The first American to scam 2 Nigerians.
I've got $1 million. You send me 10,000 and kick my ass.
So, but yeah, that's the thing. That is, they did arrest the 2 men that were spotted in the security cameras, and they have now turned around. It was 2 Nigerian brothers, and they're saying now that this has all been a hoax orchestrated by Jussie Smollett. The whole thing was a hoax from the get-go.
If you say 2 Nigerian brothers, does that not have a double meaning? I'm just asking for a friend.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. Now, some other news. Nancy Pelosi
is dumb.
Very dumb. So, President Trump has declared national emergency to get his border wall.
Still don't think it's a national emergency, but...
Well,
weird flex, but okay.
Okay. But Nancy Pelosi's response to it was a future Democratic president could declare a national emergency to declare a national emergency against gun violence. Basically an effort to try and restrict, make it tougher to own guns, basically.
That could be possible if it weren't for that pesky document that the Democrats apparently have never read, called the Constitution.
Yeah, the thing about there's nothing in the Constitution about
Border security.
Border security. And to me, that is a legit national emergency. I was just reading today that 13 I think it was 13 MS-13 gang members.
Okay, you found the number.
Yeah, I think it was 13 MS-13 gang members were pulled out of the migrant caravan in Mexico.
No.
That is a legit. That's a legit situation that we need to worry about. It's not just refugees trying to come in. It's people who are trying to come in to fly under the radar and cause violence and harm and get away with the shit.
Well, you can't classify most of them as refugees anyways. What's the definition of a refugee?
Well,
Someone that's fleeing political or religious persecution.
right. So
they don't qualify as refugees anyway.
But yeah, that is Nancy Pelosi's response to that. A future Democratic president could declare a national emergency on gun violence as a threat, as a means to say, if you do this, we're going to do this. So just be careful.
And that's the political handbook. It's tit for tat. You're going to do this. We're going to do that.
Yeah.
And it just goes back and forth. And the only people that lose are the citizens,
Right.
because these laws do not affect politicians.
Right. Absolutely. So some other things that have been coming up. Just yesterday, a 6th grader in Lakeland, Florida, was arrested. Yes, an 11-year-old 6th grader was arrested at school. The reason why is he had a substitute teacher, and the substitute teacher told him he had to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. The school's policy is students do not have to stand if they do not wish. And the substitute was not aware of the school policy. So after they had a back and forth between the substitute and the teacher, or the substitute and the student, the teacher basically said, "I'm done dealing with you," and called in the principal. So what led to the arrest was the student was being disruptive, unruly, was making threats, refused to leave the classroom, had to be escorted out, was continuing to make threats, and that's what led to the arrest. Being unruly and disruptive, and disrupting the school function, and resisting arrest without violence were the charges.
Yeah, but it should have never got to that point.
I agree. I think the school overstepped their bounds by having a 6th grader, an 11-year-old kid.
Well, I mean, you say, okay, it's school policy that you don't have to stand. The substitute teacher did not know that.
Right.
So if the kid said, "I don't have to stand," the school said, "I don't," then the substitute teacher, being the adult in the situation, should have been like, "Well, let me check with the principal."
Right.
And called the principal and be like, "Is it policy that you don't have to stand?" And then crisis averted. You don't have to arrest an 11-year-old.
Right. Now, on the other hand, this 11-year-old child is going on about how the flag and the national anthem are racist and oppressive against black people. That, to me, that is not the thought process of an 11-year-old. To me, that's something he's picking up at home.
Microphone activated.
One could make that argument that he's picking it up at home. Well, not even that he's picking it up at home. You see it on TV.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be his parents saying, "Hey, this is what we believe, and you're going to believe it too." I mean, he can see that on TV because, it's been covered in the news a lot.
It has, absolutely. But yeah, again, I think the school overstepped by having the child arrested. Suspended, yeah, I could see that. 3 days, 5 days, I could see that. Or even like you've been saying, in school suspension.
In school suspension, make him sit in a cubby and make him sit in a little cubicle and do his work there. That seems more appropriate, but it's just ridiculous because you've got a 6th grader. Here's how I know, as a child, you talk back to an adult, and the adult, instead of just sending you out of the classroom, talks back to you. Well, now all of a sudden you're like, "Well, fuck, I did it once, I got to fire back again."
Yeah.
And it just keeps escalating because no one's going, "Hey, let's just calm down."
Yeah. And the real problem I see is there's a lack of discipline at home and there's a lack of discipline in the schools. The lack of discipline in the schools because school districts are afraid of potential lawsuits. When you and I were in school,
We got beat.
Whoa, yes.
Jesus
I had,
Christ.
oh God, I had a paddle broken over my ass I don't know how many times.
I had teachers.
And I'm not joking. I mean, literally broken. Chunks of wood went flying after I was hit.
Teachers took pleasure out of beating my ass, which, you know what? I took pleasure out of being an asshole, so.
I thought you were going to say you took pleasure out of being beat.
Say what I said. Step on my cubes.
Didn't know you were into some of that 50 Shades of Grey type shit.
You know what? The only difference between 50 Shades of Grey and a Law and Order Special Victims Unit is the money. If that dude hadn't been rich, Olivia Benson would have been after his ass.
Right. And the next one, this pisses me off more than anything. Just yesterday, it was in the news. The sailor from the Times Square kiss photo on VJ Day. Big iconic, one of the biggest iconic photos of the 20th century. It shows the sailor and he's dipped the nurse down and he's kissing her and all that. He passed away yesterday at 95 years old. And there is a statue in Florida of that image. And last night, after it was announced on the news that the sailor from the photograph had died, somebody defaced the statue by spray painting #MeToo on it.
Yeah, that's not the place for that. For one, it's vandalism and it's illegal.
Yeah, and the fact that they did it in the wake of the man's death.
Yeah, people are cowards.
They are. They're cowards and they're assholes.
And I hope they find the person that did it, and I hope there's a hefty fine.
Oh, well, they're saying the damage to the statue ran about $1,000.
Yeah, and I hope they have to pay for it.
I hope they have to pay for it on top of other things, and maybe a little bit of jail time out of it, too.
I'm not going to wish jail time over spray painting stuff. If we did that, we'd have been in jail.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, let's don't open up all the wounds there.
So, but now we're going to get into the main topic of discussion for this evening, and we have a special guest for you to talk about this with us as well. Very special guest, my former company commander, and now owner of 2A Training Group, LLC, Captain Rod Burks. Rod, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
So, there's a school in Florida. We got a lot going on about Florida tonight.
It's a Florida-heavy show, people.
It really is. Manatee School for the Arts. And just to give y'all a quick heads up, we are in the middle of some biblical type rain
and thunderstorms.
And our power is flickering right now, so hopefully the weather is going to cooperate with us for the show this evening. So just wanted to give y'all a heads up on that. But as I was saying, Manatee School for the Arts, school down in Florida. I think you said they go from 6th grade to 12th grade.
Yeah, it's middle
and high school.
Yeah.
So they have gone out and hired 2 veterans to patrol the campus as armed guards. And by armed guards, I mean they are armed with Glock 9mm pistols. And according to the article that I read, semi-automatic rifles with 17-inch barrels.
Size matters.
Now, when I first read the article, I'm thinking to myself, okay, they just don't want to use the term AR-15. But then I saw images, and I don't know what these rifles are, but they are...
I want one.
Yeah, they're very nice. They are bullpup design rifles, chambered in .556, equipped with EOTech holographic sights and magnifiers.
Actually, I really just want the sight and the magnifier.
I mean, again, that's a to each their own kind of thing. Now, they're also wearing, they're also equipped with body armor, additional magazines for their weapon system, so on and so forth. Now,
well, with the exception of the slung rifle, they don't have anything a standard police officer wouldn't be carrying.
Right. So, Rod, I want to get your take on this. As a firearms instructor, as a firearms instructor, what is your take on this school bringing in veterans to patrol instead of bringing in officers from the local PD or local sheriff's office?
Well, it's I think it's a novel idea. One, I think it's brilliant because there aren't enough opportunities for, I think, to use the better part of 2 decades.
Okay.
What are we doing to give back?
We're having some technical difficulties hearing you, Rod. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to call you, and I think we're going to try and do this over the phone instead.
Okay.
So you should be getting a call from me here in just a minute.
Hold on, let me go grab my phone. I left it in the other room.
Okay. So while you're doing that, yeah, like I said, and I agree with him. It's a novel idea, and I think it's a great idea that they're doing this, because I think who better to protect children than a veteran, somebody who has basically trained his entire career to defend men, women, and children of this country.
Well, I'll say that they definitely have better training than most of the police officers. I mean, we don't pay millions of dollars for soldiers to get trained for them not to have better training than a police officer.
Right.
So, I mean, they're definitely going to have the edge on that. And they have to go through extensive shoot, don't shoot drills.
Absolutely. So, okay, we're gonna try and get Rod on the phone here. So give us just a second.
Hello, this is Rod.
Excellent, great. We can definitely get you a lot better this way. Okay. So yeah, like I said, I agree with your idea that it's a novel idea. It's a great idea that they're doing this. Now, my only thing, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a minute. You've got 2 military veterans patrolling as armed guards. A lot of people could view it as, these are combat veterans, if I'm not mistaken, people who've been deployed in combat overseas. Yeah. You have the risk for an individual with PTSD and other issues. And then you also have to look at it from the standpoint of, it's almost looking like a prison, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. You've got armed guards patrolling the area. Now,
yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, but there is one topic you brought up that, it's not really necessarily directly related, but PTS. I believe like we've got to remove the stigma of PTS. Everybody who's ever had trauma in their life has some form of PTS. But to some people it's a paper cut, to other people it's life-threatening, and it's on a spectrum somewhere in between. But as far as choosing veterans over law enforcement, the purpose of these individuals in this school in Manatee is not to enforce laws. An officer of the peace, I understand that is their job. Their job is to enforce the peace. These are guardians. Their job is to protect and run to the sound of the gun. Now there are plenty of good law enforcement officers out there, but we saw them with Parkland. There were law enforcement officers that stood idly by while the guns were firing. Your veterans are trained to run to the sound of the gun, regardless of what the risk is to their life.
Right.
Which is a very valid point.
Right. Yes. Now, talking about Parkland, and like you found out earlier, the officer that failed to go into the school while the shooting was happening, you found he was a school resource officer assigned to that school.
He was assigned. That was his job. His number one goal was to make sure nothing happened at that school.
Right. So, yeah, like you said, these, and I know it, you know it, we've both had that drilled into our mindset. Yes, we run to the sound of action. We don't run away from it. We don't retreat. We go, regardless of what will happen to us, we know we have a job to do, and we're going to do it come hell or high water.
Well, the thing that pissed me off most about that was the fact that Florida judge ruled that cops don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, they don't have to do that. If they feel like their life is threatened, they can back up. And I'm like, that's not what you're getting paid to do. It says protect and serve on your car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if that were the case, then if that applied to all facets of duty such as that, we wouldn't have a military. Well, we might have one branch of the military. We wouldn't have multiple branches.
Well, I see why the judge ruled that, because how can you? We understand by the nature of what we do, experience, and train what valor is, and valor isn't anything that's uncommon, especially in the military. It's what you saw was a lack of valor on the part of that resource officer. But you can't legislate or write policy or laws that cause people to do things that are brave, really, essentially. And it all comes down to liability. If somebody loses their life charging into a school shooter, well, now that family has recourse to, because this is the United States, land of a lawsuit. So they're gonna sue whoever said that. Well, he had to do it. And again, it goes back to why I think veterans are the best idea, because they don't need to be told what's right. They know what's right, and they act, and they do.
Right. Now, again, playing devil's advocate, you're going to have regardless the individuals out there. Well, they don't need to be armed with those kind of weapons. They don't need to be armed with assault rifles, and I hate using that term. It's a bad term. Leaves a bad taste in my mouth every time I hear it.
Right, because my assault iPhone is so much more superior. But yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think the question is, do we have do we have the right tools for the job? It's not about, does somebody need something like that? Do you need a car that goes over 70 miles an hour? No, not necessarily. Do you need a house that has, 3,000 square feet when, you only need maybe 400 to live? So yeah, I mean, we could play that game, but I don't think we'd get anywhere with nobody needs that kind. I mean, if you look at the definition of tyranny, tyranny is for, when the government has something that the people do not. And I would say that we are right on the razor's edge of tyranny, with regards to where the left wants to take us as far as our Second Amendment rights. I don't think we should have RPGs. I don't think we need landmines. Right. We don't need, high explosive devices in the hands of your everyday citizen. But when they start saying, let's put limits on what is available, that is an erosion of rights. That's not it's not practical.
Yeah, and I agree. One of my arguments has always been, whenever you hear these anti-gunners come out and say, nobody needs access to military-grade firearms. Nobody needs access to military-type weaponry. There's more to, of course, they're talking about the AR-15.
User left your channel.
There's obviously more to it than, there's more to it than just the AR-15. For one, the military does not use AR-15s. We use M4s and M16s, and now the M27. Mm-hmm. But there's more to it than that. We also use Remington 870s.
Yep.
And we use Remington 700 bolt-action rifles.
One of the best rifles ever made.
Yeah. We use, for the longest time, we used 1911s and Beretta 9mm. So, where are they going to draw the limit at?
Yeah, and to the left, there is no limit until nobody has access to a reasonable means to defend yourself. And that's why I started my business, was because, right now, there aren't a lot of places to learn to be a responsible gun owner. It's one thing to own a gun. I mean, you can buy one at Walmart, you can buy one at a gun store, you can buy one online and have it delivered to an FFL. But if you don't know any better, where are you being fed? Hey, this is how you use a gun. Video games and Hollywood. Neither one of them are teaching responsibility. They're only, the glamorization. They're trying to make a buck.
Right. So now, as an instructor, now are you NRA certified as an instructor?
Yes, I am a NRA certified instructor.
Now, where do you hold your classifications as an NRA instructor? Are you just are you a 3-gun? Are you 3-gun? Or are you just handgun, self-defense?
I am pistol and rifle.
Okay.
And then there are so many people that are don't even have the basics that for me to expand it into more, I absolutely want to, but my hands are full. I mean, because there's so many people that thirst for that knowledge. They want to be comfortable with our firearm. Our states, I understand, they have, Florida, I think the qualification course of fire was 10 rounds. You fire 10 rounds. If you hit the paper, hey, here's your permit. Of course, you have to pass the background fingerprint, make sure there's no restraining orders, so on and so forth. The South Carolina, it's 50 rounds, but that does not make you a shooter. That does not make you a responsible gun owner.
No.
Just like you don't need a trainer to go to the gym and get fit. You can go out and beat the pavement with your sneakers on. You can jack some weights in your garage, but unless you have somebody there that understands what right looks like, and also maybe has an ability to teach a little bit, chances are you're probably not going to do it.
Right. And that's why in the state of Alabama, it is so easy to obtain a gun permit, just as long as you can pass a background check.
Don't say that out loud.
As long as you can pass a background check, you don't have to go through any training, any certification, or anything like that. You can be in and out of the sheriff's office in 5 minutes. I know, I've seen me do it.
You said did you say a gun permit or a concealed?
User joined your channel.
It's a concealed weapon permit, is what it is.
Okay, understood. Yeah. I just want to make sure that, because if you had to do that to get a gun, now that's a step too far. And a lot of people think you have to have that permit before you can even buy a gun, which I think is part of the propaganda. They want people to be too scared to exercise their rights.
Right.
So they make it seem like, oh, you got to go through all this bureaucratic process. Well, actually, no. As long as you're not a felon, as long as you're a United States citizen, I believe it's over the age of 18 to buy rifles. 21 for pistols, and I think it varies by state. I'd have to look that up to be for sure. Don't have a restraining order on you. You don't use drugs. Even legal drugs, like medical marijuana, can cause you to lose your right to buy a firearm.
Yeah. See, in the state, Alabama is an open carry state. You do not have to have a permit to legally carry a firearm as long as it is displayed in the open. In order to carry concealed, you do have to obtain a concealed weapon permit. And like I said, you can be in and out of the sheriff's office in 5 minutes. You do not have to undergo any training, any certification, anything like that. Now, me personally, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I'd like to see a training class.
You have to you have to take a test and everything to get a driver's license.
Well, you got to be careful though, because a license is not a right; that's a privilege.
Right.
You can lose your driving privilege. You cannot lose your rights.
Right. And again, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Yes, it is a right to own a firearm, but it needs to be a right to own a firearm responsibly.
Well, and I think it comes down to holding people accountable for their actions. I go to a lot of leftist websites just to see kind of like, what are they saying? Because there are actually some interesting points in there. But I don't think they understand kind of the mechanics behind it. Like one of the ones I liked, but it would never work, is if you lose control of your firearm, if your firearm is gained, or you have a sidearm, and somebody who's not authorized to use it gains access to it, and they commit a crime, you should be held accountable. and because I'm all about accountability and responsibility. But here's the problem. The United States government is not allowed to keep a list of gun owners. You do a background check, and that's it. They're just doing a background check. They're not tying that gun to you because it is unlawful for the government to do so.
Now, with that being said, I know you've heard about the red flag laws going on up in Maryland and all that other stuff, where they're able to, and somebody has died because of this. You're right. The United States is not supposed to have a list of all the people who own firearms, but yet that's what Maryland is doing, essentially. They're not requiring you to register firearms or anything like that. What it is with the red flag laws is if, say I know Matt owns a firearm and I feel like Matt is not a responsible gun owner, I can call the police and they can show up and confiscate his guns until he can determine that he is a responsible gun owner.
Yeah, and the problem, and I believe you spoke about it before, was where's the due process?
Right.
That's again that, and I see that as an encroachment on our rights, our civil liberties.
Yeah, that's the one issue I had with Trump on that, was he said take the gun first, due process comes second.
That is totally unconstitutional in and of itself, because we as citizens are entitled to due process before our rights become chilled.
Well, it's one of those things where they're just moving further and further towards guilty until proven innocent, as opposed to innocent until proven guilty. I mean, you see that all the time. So that's the one thing that Trump said that I was just like, really, dude? Like, you campaigned on gun rights, and then you're going to say take the gun first, then we'll do the due process part.
Right. Now that's the other thing too, is, now we're getting into gun laws, things like that. Just a few days ago, there was a shooting in Aurora, Illinois. Disgruntled employee was called in, fired from his job, and immediately produced a firearm and began shooting people. The perpetrator, the shooter, was a felon. He had been convicted of a felony back in 1995, I think was the article that I read. And he purchased a firearm after the fact through a gun store. Now, how he was able to get past the background check and purchase the firearm, I have no idea.
I said, he could have had his rights restored.
Well, he hadn't, because once it came to light that he was a felon and had purchased a firearm, he was ordered to surrender his firearm, and he never did.
Well, I guess I'd be going to that gun shop and finding out why they didn't run the background check.
Right.
Because that should have came up immediately.
But yeah, he killed 5 people, I think it was. One of them was a 21-year-old intern on his first day there. And this guy, he is the best example that criminals don't follow laws. So establishing more laws is not going to make the criminals obey them.
The even worse part is, I guarantee you, he goes for insanity defense, crime of passion.
No, he's dead. He was shot and killed
okay.
at the scene.
Yeah, I didn't read that story.
Yeah, he was shot and killed at the scene.
But he probably, had he not been shot and killed, I guarantee you he'd have went for insanity and crime of passion.
So who shot and killed him?
Law enforcement.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's my my 2 cents, I guess, on this topic is there's an author. He's a renowned author, Dave Grossman. He wrote a couple of books that I'm aware of. One of them was on killing, the other one's on combat. And in 2010, I believe it was, he was doing a presentation for law enforcement, and they're in an auditorium, and he asked the question: in the last 50 years in North America, how many children have been killed in a school fire? So North America, 50 kids, or 50 years in a school killed by fire. 0, not 1. 1999, there was, I think, 38 kids killed in Columbine. And everybody said, oh, well, it's a fluke. But if you look around, any auditorium or any school, it's built out of cedar or cinder blocks. There's sprinklers overhead, in every room, hallways. The ceiling tiles are made out of fire retardant materials. The point is that the firefighter is the A+ student because they have overlapping layers of protection. And if you were to take this shooting in Aurora, the only layer of protection they had was law enforcement. And the point that Dave makes over and over again is that the only thing that kills a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. So if more responsible people carried and exercised their rights, I think you would see a dramatic decrease. And why, going back to Manatee School of Arts, they get it. They understand that you can't just use thoughts and prayers to make bad guys stop and to follow the rules. Sometimes you need overwhelming violence.
Right, and that's one of the things that the principal of Manatee has said. They're not looking for a fair fight. That's why they're arming these guards with these semi-automatic weapons with 17-inch barrels and Glock 9mm pistols. They're not looking for a fair fight because there's no such thing as a fair fight. If I'm not standing in a ring wearing gloves and there's a referee there, there's no such thing as a fair fight. It's either I win or I lose. And if I'm not cheating, I'm not trying.
Yeah.
In a fight for your life, there is no second place. There are no participation trophies, right?
My fear with that is, though, I know I've seen how police officers operate here lately. He's got a gun, shoot him. So you run the risk of being classified as the aggressor just because you were doing what you were supposed to be doing.
And, there's ways to go about it. Like, for example, my car was broke down on the side of the road one day. It was actually in the middle of the road in the turn lane. And a city officer showed up, and I had my gun on my hip, and it was concealed. The officer noticed the bulge in my jacket, and he asked me if I was carrying a gun. I said yes. And then he asked me if I have a concealed weapon permit. Yes, sir, I do. Do you need to see it? Yes, I do. Okay, well, it's in my right hand back pocket, which is the same side I carry my firearm on. So I told the officer, I said, I don't want to reach for anything, so if you would, please, you can pull my wallet out, and I will keep my hands up here. There's ways that you can do things to mitigate any potential escalation of force.
In that situation, yes, but you got to look at, okay, there's a school shooter, and these guys are going room to room, they're clearing, and they happen to run up on a cop, and they meet head on. Is the cop going to go, oh, wait, he's got a vest on that says blah, 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 or is he going to immediately shoot? So you got to look at that. This dude's in there actively clearing rooms, trying to find the shooter, and the cop is doing the same thing.
Right.
So that you run that risk.
So in that situation, when our protocol in the military, if we're in a house and we're clearing rooms, then we would leave an element outside doing outside security. Now, This is kind of a strange situation because it never really happened, but if by chance another patrol came up to assist with what was going on, outside element would say, hey, we've got guys inside, so just be aware. And then before we came walking out of the building, we would always announce before we came out, hey, 3 Marines coming out, 2 Marines coming out, whatever the case may be. Plus, we always had constant radio contact going on. And it would be the same way for these guys. If law enforcement showed up during an active shooter situation, you've already got the guards on scene, patrolling the area, and then law enforcement...
They're not going to be stacked on doors, clearing rooms together.
Yeah. There's definitely a great potential for blue on blue or green on blue.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's going to be, I think, immediate action drills. Things that that's an excellent point that you brought up that I hadn't thought of, and I think that's what makes veterans such a useful asset to use in those things, because they're going to bring that point to the table. They're going to, and people can have a discussion about it, and then at least think about it. Do the rehearsals through their mind, or even doing drills. on what to do if you're you're the good guy with a gun and you run into another good guy with a gun. Hey, who has authority, kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing about we have in the military, especially, we have active shooter drills, and they've begun doing active shooter drills at schools in the event that a school shooting does occur. I was just reading on Twitter the other day, this school teacher whose facility just went through an active shooter drill, and she said she wanted to conduct a study, studying her peers around her and everything during the drill. And she said two of the teachers, one of them was a cook in the cafeteria, the other one was a science teacher. The cook in the cafeteria's thought process was, I have knives. Somebody comes at me, I can throw knives at them. The science teacher was, I have all these chemicals in here. I've got bleach, I've got hydrochloric acid, whatever. I can throw that at the shooter. And this woman's thought process was, you're really going to throw knives at somebody with an assault rifle? You're going to throw bleach at somebody with an assault rifle? My takeaway from her study was the cook and the science teacher are refusing to be victims, and they're going to do whatever they have to do to stop the shooter and save the lives of those children. The teacher doing the study, my takeaway from her thought process was, she's going to be the first one to run and hide and cower in a corner somewhere.
Yeah, and you never know until you're in that situation, and a lot of people haven't been desensitized, through training and whatnot. I like the idea, but I still think that they are under the influence of the greatest threat to our school children, and that is denial.
Right.
They're thinking, oh, well, it's never going to happen, so I can talk a big game. Hey, I'm going to do this. Well, have you ever trained for that? I mean, do you throw knives on a regular play? I don't. I've goofing around. I've thrown a knife, and it bounces off of whatever I'm aiming. But I don't train for that. So that's the point. Is if you're not going to prepare for it, you're living with your head in the sand.
Right.
I actually saw a school. I cannot remember the name of the school. They were actually training their students to throw books at the person that come in the door with a gun, and I'm like, I probably don't want to involve the children in this.
Yeah. And I agree with that. Now going back to the active shooter drill, as far as what we were saying about blue on blue or green on blue,
they have to train together.
Yeah, they really do. That's why they need to have these active shooter drills. So that way your first responder is going to be the school resource officer, or in the case of Manatee, the veterans that have been hired to guard the school.
Well, I mean, the cops are going to benefit from it more than anybody, because who's cleared more rooms?
Yeah. And
yeah, good point.
Yeah. So, your veterans that are on site guarding the school, they are the first responders. They are the lead, so to speak. The officers,
they're one layer of protection.
Yes,
they're just because there might be a going back to the analogy of the fire. You may have blankets to put somebody out that's caught on fire, but it may not work if it's up high.
Right.
You may need an extinguisher. So they should be overlapping and mutually supporting.
They should. But what I'm getting at, what you were talking about, the potential for blue on blue or green on blue, communication is key.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as law enforcement arrives on scene, they need to be in communication with the armed guards at the school.
Yeah.
And then, try to mitigate as much as possible that possible blue on blue or green on blue. Hey, we're already in the school. We know where the shooter is at. Y'all just freaking cordon off the area outside. Make sure he doesn't get out. Or we've got 5 shooters in here and there's only 2 of us. So y'all need to send a team in. This is where we're at, and this is the direction we're facing.
I think the main thing I like about having guards at the school is if you have somebody that can engage the shooter, that's one less student that's being shot at.
Right. And unfortunately, that's not always the case, because, that happened with Columbine. The school resource officer that was on scene, he actually did get into a shootout with one of the Columbine shooters. And, that was, just a couple of minutes. And Rod, as well as I do, 2 minutes in a firefight is an eternity.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, but how many students got away because of that? You got to think about that.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you're wrong.
And honestly, that SRO in that situation, he was not prepared for that day. Nobody was prepared for Columbine.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, but at least Manatee is at least they're learning from the similar situations in the past. I mean, because what better target than students in a school? If you're a terrorist or if you're disgruntled socialist, fill in your whatever bad guy you want. But why wouldn't you go anywhere other than school? I mean, it's a gun-free zone.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a gun-free zone until somebody brings a gun in there.
Right. And if I'm a bad guy, and it kind of, it reinforces why, we don't need more gun laws. In fact, there are more laws governing the ownership, sale, and sale of firearms than there are in medical practice. There are more laws restricting guns than people who are responsible for, medical malpractice was responsible for, I think, like 38,000 deaths in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you remove the self-inflicted gunshot wounds, I think this is some like 2,500. I don't remember the exact number, but it was significantly less than medical malpractice.
Right.
But yeah, sorry, I got off on a tangent.
No, you're fine.
It happens to us all the time.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest issues that I take with leftists is they don't take into account, we've got 15,000 deaths that occurred by firearm this year, and 10,000 of them were self-inflicted. They're not taking that into account. They're just throwing that number out there, trying to push their agenda.
Well, see, the thing about that is what is the argument they always use? We should pass this law even if it only saves one child's life. And I'm like, okay, that's their argument until you're like, well, let's put guns in schools. Then they're like, oh, no, we can't do that. I'm like, but what if it saves one child's life?
Yeah.
It's just your same argument, only we're doing it differently.
Yeah. And I don't know, the whole situation, I agree with the principle, we want to have an unfair advantage. We want to be the ones that come out on top. I agree with, like I said before, the thought process of there's no such thing as a fair fight. And
I think that principle should probably be put on a cabinet somewhere, on a national level. But because wow, I don't know if the principal was a veteran or maybe he's just surrounded himself with really smart guys. But that's the most intelligent thing I've heard an educator say.
I kind of got that veteran vibe from him when we watched that video.
A little bit,
just
yeah.
The way he spoke, I was like, that sounds like something somebody that served this country would say.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, the whole thing just, I would like to see it happen in more places across the country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's never going to happen in New York. Hang that up.
Or California. And of course, the argument is always going to be, it's turning into a police state, and having these armed guards at schools as well as law enforcement patrolling. I disagree with that.
Well, here's the thing, though. If you look at a California school, they've already got armed guards. They've already got metal detectors.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many school shootings are coming out of California? They've already got these things in place.
Yeah.
That's why the school shootings aren't happening there.
Yeah.
They're happening in other states where they don't have armed guards and metal detectors.
Right. And, we've had, even in our little small podunk rinky-tink town, not specifically at our school, but within this county, we have had, 2 school threats within the last year?
Yeah. One was a bombing threat.
One was a bomb threat.
And they did catch that guy. And
there was another one. I think the student had ammunition on him.
There was one. Actually, there was 2 bomb threats. There was one in Huntsville. She called one. A girl called one in because she thought she was going to fail the test and she wanted more time to study. So she literally called in a bomb threat to her school.
Whatever happened to just pretending to be sick?
Or I don't know. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
Right?
Like the dude next to you might be smarter than you. I'm calling a freaking bomb threat.
You know, the best one I've seen was this kid who printed a smart water label that had all the test answers on it.
Yeah, it is smart water. But I mean, yeah, I mean, even in our little bitty area, you know, we have that issue. But I mean, we have SR. Well, we used to have SROs. I don't know if we do anymore.
I think we still do.
Because that was a big program. Like right after Columbine, they were like, we got to get SROs in all the schools.
Oh yeah.
So we had deputies, at least one deputy at every school.
Yeah, I know. Fort Payne has, and Fort Payne is the largest school in the county. Fort Payne has 2 or 3.
Yeah. We had 5. We only got 1.
Yeah,
And he was a big one.
and he wasn't even a sheriff. He was our police chief.
Yeah, he was our police chief, was our SRO. And if you ask that,
You like to throw out the devil's advocate there, and so I'm just thinking here. Why not arm teachers? And I don't know if you've had this topic before, and I'm not necessarily for it, but I was just curious. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, as if they're going to have a standardized training for it,
and a lot of training.
yes, and a lot of training, there would have to be a whole lot of prep work to do something like this. But if they were to do standardized, I'd say biannual training.
Well, the problem I have with training teachers is you can train them up to the point of pulling the trigger.
Yeah,
And that's the hard part.
Right.
Pointing your weapon at a person with knowing that you're fixing to have to take that life.
yeah.
No one can train for that.
The way they drilled it into us in the military is once a person, a human being has a weapon in their hand and is engaging you in a threatening manner, that person is no longer a human being.
Yeah.
They are now a target.
Yeah, that's going to be the hard one, I think, because you're going to have a lot of these teachers that are like, yeah, I'll do it, but then when the time comes, can they actually do it?
Yeah. So me personally,
Well, what about if they had their CWP? You know, what if they were allowed to carry in their state? You know, they're recognized by law enforcement to carry concealed. Would that change your opinion at all? Like it's not mandatory. They're not the primary. It's just another layer of protection.
Well, see,
Right? So they've taken their own time to train themselves.
my uncle is actually a concealed weapons holder in this state. He's also a teacher and a coach at a high school down south, and he wants to be able to carry because he's like, he's like, I don't know. He said it personally. He's like, I don't know that I could shoot somebody. He's like, but I do know that I would protect my students at all costs. So, I mean, in that case, like if they were just like, all right, well, if you're a concealed carry holder and you want to carry, you can, but I still think there has to be tons of training.
yeah, and that's why I said there needs to be standardized training. If they did it twice a year, standardized training, and by standardized, I mean like if it was conducted by, Alabama State Law Enforcement Association or whatever.
Yeah. Or maybe even the ABI.
Yeah, ABI or ALEA, something like that. Then I'd be all for it. I wouldn't necessarily trust, football coach going out doing his own thing training and math teacher going out doing her own thing, because they're going to train 2 different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see both sides of it. I from the liability standpoint, from the school, protecting their own interest. Because, they still have, teachers having sex with students, and you would think that, no, they should know better.
Yeah.
So that's my reservation on why I don't think, teachers, or at least teachers shouldn't be required to do anything like that. But I think if, let's say that they did the truth to teachers, maybe they've got the background, the history, and that's it. I don't think it would hurt.
Well, I mean, our old principal was a sergeant major.
Yeah. Our former principal was command sergeant major of the Alabama National Guard.
So, like, him carrying, perfectly fine. I mean, he's trained for it.
Yeah, he was the top dog of the enlisted side of the Alabama National Guard. So, yeah, someone like him, absolutely.
Yeah, go for it. I say that's great. That's one more person that can help out in that situation.
Yeah, but if it's Bubba Joe, who's the defensive coordinator for the football team, who goes out shooting...
King. You want King to have
Oh, God, no. God, no.
like, oh, my. He would have shot me.
Oh, man.
I can almost guarantee that would have happened.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't even want to think about the number of teachers that would have taken shots at you and me both. Henson definitely would have shot us.
Their own argument against them, they talk about how they're, so poorly funded and have to buy their own materials. You'd be like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't afford your classroom materials, and you better not be buying guns.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I have to buy any more like hand sanitizer for my son's class, and his teacher pulls out a Glock, I'm gonna be like, all right, look, you take your damn Glock back, get a High Point, and do something else.
Shit, at that point, she might as well just be throwing the erasers at him.
Man, have you held a High Point?
I have.
If it don't shoot, you can beat them to death.
Until it breaks.
That thing, it's a brick. It ain't breaking.
I've seen them break.
I watched them make one out of a brick, man. It's a literal brick.
Oh man, this has been a good show. I've really enjoyed it. We're gonna have to start. We're gonna have to start wrapping up. So before I do, we've started a new contest. We're looking for some brand recognition for ourselves, a logo, if you will. So you can go on our Facebook page and see what that's about. Remember, Two Beards Talking. And what we're looking for, well, I posted an example so you can see. But in order to be eligible, you have to like and follow the page. You have to enter your logo into the comments on the post, and then you have to share the post. So, yeah, be sure to go on there, do that, and we're going to run until the 26th, so that'll be next Tuesday. So if you know anybody who does graphic artwork or anything like that...
Alert from AOS Alert Manager. This map can't connect to iCloud because of the problem with Rodney.Burks@gmail.com.
So, send them to our page, and, the winner that we pick, we're going to put the logo on a stainless steel tumbler, and that'll be the prize for the winner, is a stainless steel tumbler with our logo on it. So we got to start wrapping up. Rod, thanks for coming on the air. It's been fun. I really appreciate you coming out and talking to us.
I appreciate you all having me on the show. I look forward to listening to you guys in the future.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. And again, big shout out to all the troops out there. Keep up the good work. Come home safe. Everybody's rooting for you back home. This has been